my wife knows about 4, stand by, and 3, and 2, and leave 1 open, I could do that.
Welcome to Relevance. The world's greatest podcast. Hosted by author Mike R. Aikins. Where they dare to talk about topics that really matter.
Yeah. Hey, child support. I know that it got you stressing. You've been looking for some answers. You got so many questions. Mike Aikins got your back, and I gotta mention his book, A Simple Guide to Child Support Redemption. Hold up, get you back on track. Now it's time to make it happen. Save a whole lot of stacks. You gotta read through the chapters. You are really not alone. I know it can be controversial, but he's really here to help you when it feel like people trying to hurt you. Ain't no shame, time for educating yourself, giving examples and cases so you ready for what's next. Documented testimonies, step by step, easy to read. Be prepared in legalities, don't need a legal team. Hey, came to let you know, you don't wanna miss it. Hey, a simple guide to child support redemption. Hold up, came to let you know, you don't wanna miss it. A simple guide to child support redemption. Let's go.
Okay, I'll just start off here. Welcome to the Relevance Podcast. I am your host, Mike Aikins. Tonight I have again with me Ms. Maryann Petri. She's an author of the book. Go ahead, Mary. Tell them your title again, please.
It's Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, available on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Apple, and Smashwords.
Great. That is wonderful. And I am the author of A Simple Guide to Child Support Redemption. It's available on Amazon.com. You can get it on Walmart.com. And you just Google it. It's available on several other platforms. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get the Relevance Podcast underway. So you can go ahead, Mary, and do your thing as well.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, child support, and CPS issues. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, and today I have, again, Mike Aikins. Thank you for joining on, Mike.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you back. We had such a good talk the last time.
Absolutely. These podcasts are going well. When you have two people that have gone through basically the same type of situations, it makes for good dialogue. Our topics are what a lot of people are struggling with right now, which is the child support situation. So I'm looking forward to even more podcasts in the future.
Definitely. It's good to educate the public. People need to know this is going on. People will have no idea what can happen.
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about the prison industrial complex,
Oh, yes.
man, I tell you, those are the 3 most dominant words that come to mind when you start talking about child support and Title 4D.
It's a very frightening topic. And funny, you should mention talking about this tonight, because I think it was like last week I was watching TV and they had a commercial that they were talking about a trade show on prison things you can buy for your prison.
What? Oh, like
Yes.
if you're an owner of a prison, or
Yeah, wardens, that you'd go to a trade show and
so it's
here's
that
some new,
popular now. It's that popular
yeah,
and that widespread that even they're coming to these guys now.
yeah. And it's like, so you could buy new restraints. There's new tasers you could try out. They were showing all sorts of, it was a massive trade show.
Right. And and that just goes to show you how popular the prison industrial complex is, right now. As we mentioned before, I think in one of the other podcasts, uh, America, the United States, has more people incarcerated than any other country in the world. 25%. That's one out of every four people are basically incarcerated in America.
Mhm.
Isn't that amazing to
It-
even fathom that type of number? I mean, it's like everybody else is in jail.
Right.
Of
And
course.
some people are in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of these
Ah,
cases. I mean, let's talk about the Amber Geiger case. Okay, remember that case? Do you remember Amber Geiger,
yes.
the lady that,
That,
yeah, she came into the wrong apartment and ended up shooting a guy, supposedly, that because she was in the wrong apartment and killing him. Okay, and then they had this big trial, and then they let her. Well, they sent her to jail, but then the judge gave her a Bible at the end of the trial and all this. It just didn't seem real. Okay, and listen, I am in Dallas. Okay, and while this whole thing is going on, I'm calling bullshit.
mhm.
I'm calling straight bullshit. I just you just cannot make me believe that actually happened. And a lot of the things that they do, the media, they call it false ops. I mean, they're just putting things out there to create a narrative to get people thinking. Because once it gets put on TV, it gets spun. They spin it, spin it, spin it. Next thing you know, it gets legs, and it's all around the world, all around the United States. There's 6 major media outlets. They get it, and they just take it and they run with it. And by the time you hear it 1,000 times, it doesn't matter whether it's the truth or a hoax. You
Right.
people are gonna believe it. So I don't know. I mean, I tried to stay away from it. I didn't talk about it a lot on any of my podcasts, but I don't believe, I mean, you just cannot get me. I live in this city, okay? You cannot get me to believe that happened. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense how somebody could go into somebody else's apartment. Are you that stupid in your mind that you would go into somebody else's apartment and shoot and kill them? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
No.
That has probably never happened before, and it probably never will ever happen. So, when they bring up all this stuff and put it on TV, that doesn't necessarily make it true just because it's on TV or just because they have a court case about it.
Right.
So I'm here to tell you, man, I don't believe everything I hear or see on TV.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that believe everything they hear and they don't question anything. And when I was going through my child support case, no one could believe this was that this was going on this long.
Yeah, I mean, would your court system actually allow witnesses in
Oh,
the court?
yes.
Okay, and then they had you said they had cameras recording or not?
No.
No.
I did not see any cameras in there whatsoever.
Okay, okay.
There should have been.
Yeah, and see, that's the equalizer that they probably never want to see happen because it would legitimize things too much, and it would
Right.
put those judges and stuff under the microscope. and it would allow other people to see, the blatant, disregard to justice that goes on a regular basis.
Right. And it's a disgrace what they do to people in there. And the other argument is, well, these kids, they have to have their child support. I remember calling up to the sheriff's office and asking how many, what's the ratio in prison
Uh-huh.
between the men and the women. And I don't know, for some reason we got off the topic, and he said, well, we have to be collecting this, I think he was talking about his own personal situation that a relative of theirs wasn't getting their child support and they should be. And well, how do you explain entitlement? Well, do I deserve to be, getting the credit, say, as an artist? And I'm not, do you deserve this child support?
Yeah.
Another topic along with that ties kind of with that is, you've got a boyfriend girlfriend situation and the girlfriend becomes pregnant and she wants to keep the baby. Well, if you're the guy, you don't want to get married, you don't want to have a baby, that is your right and should be your right to just walk away. And that is her responsibility, is to take care of and raise that child on her own. Why should a man get sucked into having to pay for a child that he did not want and was, let's say, taking all the precautions possible that he could to not have this child?
Right.
And you know, I don't know if you want to put this out as a podcast. Maybe I ruined your podcast by saying that, but I think, I just don't think it's fair to a guy if he's being told, well, I'm going to keep the baby and then I'm going to collect child support off of you.
Oh yeah. Anytime it's blatant like that, it's not a natural situation where both parties were in agreement with what is going down. Um, it's going to get worse when the government gets involved. It's going to get much worse because the system is already, hyper fitted on one side of the issue, and as soon as two people come in there with differences, and one is on one side and the other is on the other side, it's just going to be terrible, and the government is going to make all the money. You know, it's just it just doesn't make sense when you think about it. People don't take the time to. They're so emotional, and I'm guilty of this. I was emotional when I first went through my first divorce. I've only had one, but I was very emotional at the time because this was something I was doing for the first time. I never knew. I never talked to anybody that had gone through what I was about to go through, and hadn't read any books or anything like that to even fathom what I was in store for. And the first time it started happening to me, and I started realizing that the laws are not they're not they're not justifiable for both sides. And when I realized that, wow, you can go to court and not get justice. I just I didn't commit a crime, so I'm going to court to try to get a divorce. I didn't realize that the laws were written for just the custodial parent and not for the non-custodial parent. Some of the people, I think, on her side, on my ex's side, I think they already knew what I was about to embark upon, and I think they took advantage of that and just tightened up
Mm-hmm.
the noose and just stirred it up and made it a lot worse than what it really was, so that they could take advantage of me in that situation. Because nobody deserves to be alienated from their kids during any kind of process. I mean, not if you love your kids and you want to take care of them and you want to see them. Uh, a government system shouldn't be allowed to come in and determine that.
Right.
And that's what happens on a regular basis. I mean, and we were talking about the prison industrial system, and we're talking about how they get money based on sending people to jail. When you
Right.
went to jail, I went to jail. They get money based on sending people to jail. That's not justice. Trying to get people to understand that is not, when a person doesn't have the right to come in and get due process. Due process says that you can present your evidence before a trial jury of your peers. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
when you don't get that in family court,
No.
you don't get anything close to that. So how is this system allowed to sit over here and prosper and just make more money every year while it's sitting there alienating parents from their kids? People are committing suicide. Um, People are losing their jobs, their homes, all of their financial stability. Um, but yet you got people that work in these industries and work on this particular side of the industry that are just laughing all the way to the bank, and they don't care
Yeah.
about people like you and me that have to go through this because they're making so much money hand over fist, and then it doesn't matter to them that they're not, doing the right thing, so I'm just
Right.
hoping something big happens one of these days. We're gonna get a president, or we're gonna get. I really don't feel like a president is gonna do it. Like I mentioned in that podcast before that we did. I really feel like it's gonna be done on a local level first in
Mm-hmm.
each state, and then it goes up to the state level, and then states are going to start doing what that state did and what that state did and what
Mm-hmm.
that state
Mm-hmm.
because right now they're just making so much money. They don't care.
Yeah, people can't afford to survive with what the judge is ordering
Exactly.
while they're deliberately inflating everyone's child support.
Absolutely. They use this system called imputed income. Is where they base it on your potential to make money, not based on what you make. So you can't go out and get a loan on imputed income. You can't
Right, right.
finance a house or get a car or get a bank loan based on imputed income, based on your potential income. They want to see what you actually make. And child support and family law has been getting away with this for years. They can sit there and say, okay, you should be making $60,000. We're gonna base your child support on $60,000 because you're a registered nurse, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the average of what they should be making. So we're gonna base your child support on that. That doesn't have anything to do with what you're making, but that's what they'll base it on. And then they'll start
Right.
charging you penalties, late fees, and all this kind of stuff,
Monthly fees.
monthly fees, when you can't pay that amount. And then throw you in jail, okay?
Right.
If you fall behind, and then when you go to court and you try to present your evidence, which is your check stub, what else can you? It got down to the point where I took my tax returns in there. You can't get any better than a tax return. Okay, if I'm bringing my tax return in there and I'm showing you what I have made the past year, and during that past year, you were charging me child support based on money that I wasn't even making, but here are my tax returns to prove it, but you won't even look at them.
Right, right. They won't even look at them. I would say the conference officers down there in the basement of the courthouse where they belong, they don't care. Even if you don't bring one, then they'll just take the party's word for it.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have seen it with my own eyes, and I have no faith in the domestic relations units being run around here and what they're doing to people and destroying people. And when you are sentenced to prison and that judge had wanted a purge amount of, we'll say, $2,000, and you can't cough it up, and then they say, well, they want you in there for so many months. And they are depending on your relatives to cough up the money, which is called extortion.
Oh yeah.
And then after I had gotten out and a month had gone by, I had gone into my account to see what, if the purge amount was on there. And it was on there. The 2000 was on there, and it went right to the party. Like there was no, like, I don't understand why wasn't any Title 4D taken out of that?
Yeah, they don't
But,
they don't have a formal system that they go by. They do whatever they want to do. It's like it's not the system that the bank uses to figure interest or to figure penalties or any of that stuff. They do whatever they want to do. I don't know where these judges got learned math, but they can, man, you can look up and you'll have $25,000 worth of extra child support on your credit or something, and you don't even know where it came from. I heard at one point that if uh, the custodial mother takes services from the government in Texas, like just the different services that they offer, like food stamps or a loan or anything like that, they make the non-custodial parent pay that back along with the child support that they're charging you, and they don't have to give. They only have to give. It's in my book. They only have to give something like, when I wrote the book, which was in 2018, uh, $40 of the child support that they collect from the non-custodial parent. They only have to give $40 of that, to the custodial parent, and she can get other services from the government to compensate for that, and then the state takes all the rest of that money that they're garnishing. Can you imagine? Can you?
unfortunately, yeah, right. I noticed, I was going through my paperwork, and I noticed that they had given him a downward deviation because he was married.
A downward, what is that? What's a downward deviation?
Um, they increased my child support and gave him a downward deviation
Hmm.
in what I guess I'm assuming his salary is, based on the fact that he was married.
See,
I mean, I can send you this. I can send this to you so you can see it for yourself. I can pull it up on my phone even, if you want me to.
what's sad is that most of the people like you and me that get involved in this, you know, we'll hang in here as long as we can, and then we'll just go to something else, right? But you have a
Right.
lot of
Well,
people, and this is another subject I wanted to kind of get into when I mentioned people that are involved in the struggle. Uh,
mhm.
And I can name some of the people that I started out trying to seek help from on YouTube. There's a guy out there by the name of Eamon Osiris. I don't know if
Oh,
you heard
yes. Yes.
this,
Awesome.
but this guy, I mean, he tells it like it is and whatnot, but he is so wishy-washy. I mean, with what he does and the way he charges you for the information. One time, uh, I logged on to get some information from him. He calls his website deceptionstoppers.com, right?
Hmm.
And he's giving all the judges and the court systems and family court the middle finger when you log on to his website, and
Yeah.
he's calling it like it is. He's really, you know what I'm saying? But you know, they sit there and censor, uh, you know, stuff like what we put out, this rated G type podcast type stuff,
Right.
censored, but then they let that guy go on and on and on. But I said that to say, I signed up for some one-on-one conferencing with him, and you know, when people start saying I'm not a lawyer, they put that disclaimer out there. I'm not a lawyer. I am not giving you legal advice. You need to seek a licensed lawyer if you want to get some real legal. But people know that by now. I mean, there are things that you can say and do that happen to you. All you're doing is speaking the truth. I mean, you're just speaking
Hmm.
from experience. You're not out there saying, "Hey, people, you do this too. You do exactly what I did," because it doesn't work like that. Everybody's situation is going to be uniquely somewhat different. You know, uh,
Right.
something is going to be just a little bit different by the time you get to the court situation or the lawyer situation or the judge situation. Just like what you had talked about earlier with like your lawyer telling you that, it depends on the type of judge we get. Depends on the judge we get. If we get a judge that I know or that I'm good friends with, they're going to take care of me no matter what, And when you start hearing stuff like that, you know that this is a system that has so many levels of corruption. Nothing will turn it around. The only thing that's going to turn this around is for people to stop engaging in it, in the process.
Exactly.
Just like
Exactly.
what we were talking about, just don't even put it in the court's hands. If I could reach 1,000 people out there today, tonight, during this podcast, and if they go tell 1,000, and then they go tell 1,000, and they go tell 1,000, and then they go tell 1,000, and then people just finally do the research and understand, tell everybody they know, don't get involved in family court. Don't do it.
Hmm.
Then
Which
it
is
might make
actually, yeah,
a difference one day.
right. Family court is actually a probate court. It's really not, you know,
Really not a
well,
court. It's not.
no, it's a kangaroo court, unfortunately, where they do whatever they want and apparently wear whatever lipstick they're in the mood to wear, and that's how they're going to judge you. And well, this is what I had found. Was telling you about the conference officer, and what they wrote was the number one, it says order established in the amount of, we'll say 800 a month for the support of, we'll say 4 minor children. This order is based on the plaintiff, which was me, a verified income and assessing the defendant in an earning capacity of 1,000, I don't know, we'll say 1,090 a week. A downward deviation was given in consideration of the additional income in the plaintiff's household. And I don't understand what that meant. I was like, what?
What kind of cockamamie BS is that, man? A downward deviation. I mean, you don't do that when you go into buy a house or something, and you're trying to
Yeah. I mean, right. Can I,
house. They don't give you no downward deviation allowance.
can I have a downward deviation applying for a mortgage just
Yeah,
because I have 2 dogs?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Or you
that's
go
basically, I mean, I don't understand.
you go in there to buy a car, you be like, can I get that downward deviation on all of this tax money I owe? So that I can put that down on this car.
Yeah, could I have gotten a downward deviation on that stupid purge amount you ordered, Your Honor?
Downward deviation. I mean,
Yeah, people don't understand that when you get involved in this court system, and like you said earlier, stay out of it. Stay
yeah,
out of it
do
and work amongst yourselves.
absolutely. Because the most horrifying thing that I found out about it when it was way too late was that child support is voluntary. It's voluntary. Okay. You're voluntarily signing up for this. So that's what a good parent and a good person does. You sign up,
Right.
take care of your kids. In the event you have to have a divorce or separate from that other person, your ex spouse, you sign up to take care of your kids. That's what an upstanding individual, a good person with integrity, is going to do. Okay.
Hmm.
But they take that and manipulate it, stir it around, turn it around, flip it, slap it up, flip it, rub it down. And the next thing you know, you're on the other side of the law.
Hmm.
They're labeling you, stereotyping you as a deadbeat parent. Okay, the deadbeat dad term came out during the Bill Clinton era. We're gonna talk about Bill Clinton because you and I had some information going back and forth about how he's very instrumental in getting child support and family court where it is today and all of the money that's been made. And him and Hillary have their hands in a lot of this money. Uh,
Right.
when the Personal Work Responsibility Act came out in 1996 or whatever, at first it was just for government employees. Then they just pushed it down to everybody. And and when welfare went away, child support took over. So basically, child support is just another form of welfare. And that's what I tell people. It's another form of welfare. People be like, I would
Hmm.
never be involved in no welfare. Well, you are if you're in child support situation. If you're
Right.
in the child support system, it's just another form of welfare. That's all it is.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
they,
it's,
they're taking money, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
I would hear from my kids that I was not paying anything. And I
Oh yeah,
explained I was paying, they were garnishing, and whatever your father got, I have no idea because
Abs-
I questioned the Title 4D. I didn't know if that was coming into play.
absolutely. It always comes into play, and it's amazing because you're sitting there and you don't know all these levels of injustice that you're gonna have to face when you get into child support. Like I said, you
And
voluntarily, if you're a good person, you volunteer to do it, and then when they throw all this stuff at you, and you're like, man, I just didn't know this was going to happen. I want to take care of my kids, but then
right,
things that they do to you makes it seem like they alienate you from your kids, and they make it seem like you're not trying to do the best you can for your kids. And this is where all of the exploitation, corruption, collusion, manipulation, evil, this is where all this comes into play, you know.
hmm
So
hmm because when we had divorced, he agreed to, he wanted to pay something in child support. I think I told you earlier.
mm,
What I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't understand what was happening, was that he was handing the child the check to give to me. And so the kid is obviously looking at what the father is paying the mother. and then starting to resent you for taking money from the father, which is the start of parental alienation.
Wow. And that's almost like reverse discrimination. It's just wrong on so many levels because the people that's on the strong side of it, it's just they're just wrong about the way the approach that they're taking, to inevitably arrive at a certain decision, which is inevitably to ruin one parent and prop up the other one. Okay, the one that they're
Hmm.
propping up is the one that they're gonna make all the money off of, and then they're gonna help them while they sit there and destroy this other one.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, what he should have been doing is either handing me the check himself, because when we divorced, he wanted to pay something. And to be honest with you, I never even considered or even thought about getting child support. I just was that naive. I admit it. Because then when he brought it up, I thought, well, whatever you want to pay me is fine with me. I was not out for blood, and I was taking a far lesser amount than what the court would have ordered him.
right.
And then there he is giving the check to the kid who was handing it to me and looking at it for years. That went on for years.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then other things happened, but that's in my book that,
Yeah. I mean, they break so many laws and so many rules. Just like the Fair Credit Reporting Act, um, they'll allow the state attorney general or the child support enforcement people to put stuff on your credit that isn't even uh, justified. It is not done by the way the regular systems are done. They'll just let them put it on your
right,
credit, and you try to dispute it, and they won't even look at your dispute. They'll say, "Oh, the information is verified." How can it be verified when it wasn't correct, when it wasn't ever correct in the first place? You know, and you can send a cease and desist letter,
right,
and you can do all these sorts of things, and they don't have to do anything. And 9 times out of 10, they won't do anything. So when you go out here and you look at all these people that are out here trying to help, and they start out, what I was going to allude to earlier was you got people that start out with good intentions, like even those fathers' rights advocacy groups. They start out with good intentions, but after a while,
hmm,
they can't fight anymore. So guess what? They get bought out, and they start just middle of the road. They'll be middle of the road, and they start getting money off of the guys that they were originally trying to help. I'll tell you what happened to me. I went through one of those fathers' rights advocacy groups, and they sent me a guy, a referral to a system to go through for a lawyer, right? So I'm thinking, okay, this is a fathers' rights advocacy group, so they know that normally the guy's getting ripped off, or the lady in your situation is getting ripped off by lawyers. They're not being truthful to you. They're setting you up to fail. So then they know this, right? So then you go in there and you trust them because you finally have found someone that's gonna help. So you kind of let your guards down, right? So you believe in these people. This guy set me up with a lawyer, and of course, they know that they weren't going to do anything. They know that they weren't going to change my situation. They knew it, but they took my money anyway. And the way he did it, he was like, "Well, I do kind of take a donation to refer you to this lawyer. I am a nonprofit, but I take a donation to
hmm,
refer you to this lawyer. How much do you have?" Dude, if you knew my situation and you knew how bad my situation is, and the reason I'm coming to a father's advocacy group is because I've been ripped off on all my money. Okay. But then you
right.
have the audacity to ask for some money. to refer me to a lawyer that's going to help me. So if you think about it, and that's what I'm trying to tell people, when you think about these situations, they don't make sense. Take off running in the other direction because that doesn't make sense. Think about it. I'm going to a father's rights advocacy group who's referring me to a lawyer that really isn't going to help me.
Right.
They end up ripping me off, but then he's asking for money to refer me to that lawyer. So you're supposed to be a nonprofit. You're supposed to be helping people that are on their last leg in terms of getting help from some credible source to get past their predicament. But yet you're still asking for money. So if you think about it like that, people, somebody's still asking for money, they're worse than the lawyers.
Right. I also think, and I was on somebody else's podcast and we were talking, I think it was one of the first ones I ever did. And we were talking about, what if we just abolished and got rid of the child support? Let's say there was no money to fight over.
Yes. I mean, that right there it goes in with shared parenting. It should never be a situation where two parents are not allowed to share in the support of their children. When that happens, that's when you throw everything out the window and you start believing in these unfair, biased rules and laws that are only there to help certain people. That brings up an important topic, and I'm glad you brought that up because I want you to watch a video with this guy. It's called The Myth of the Deadbeat Dad. This guy said, should child support be abolished?
Okay.
And this guy he's very credible. He's a doctor, and he's got a PhD in philosophy and psychiatry. And this is what he says. So let's listen to this guy. There's people out there that's trying to fight this thing, but I'm telling you, man, it's not enough. It's just
right.
Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks, should the child support system be abolished? So specifically here, I'm talking about mandatory child support based on the income of the two parents. This is an issue that I've heard quite a few times in my clinical experience. People on both sides, those receiving support and those having to pay support, who are upset by the system. Another related question here would be, is the system fair to fathers? So that's kind of where I'm looking at this for this particular video. I'm not focusing as much here on how the system could be unfair to mothers, really focusing more on the fathers. Some other related questions would be, how does mental health factor into the child support debate? And is the child support system good for children? Now, when I use this term child support system, I'm referring to a general set of principles that may vary from country to country or from state to state in the United States. Much of the research I read on this subject deals with the system in the United States, and of course, in terms of my clinical experience, I practice in the United States. Now, the goal of child support policy is to reduce child poverty and its adverse effects. But fewer than half of the children who are eligible for child support receive full payment, and many receive no payment. 24% of children under the age of 18 are living with their mothers, but not their fathers. So this whole issue of child support is a significant concern. In my clinical experience, I've seen a lot of people upset with the child support system. Very few people happy with it on either side. It's not unusual for mothers to complain they don't get enough child support or that the father doesn't pay. Many fathers complain that they're paying too much. The system is too aggressive in chasing them down for money by putting them in jail or taking away their driver's license. And they believe the system is not willing to make modifications to the support order in response to changing circumstances like the loss of a job. So pretty much it seems like everyone hates the system. So why do we have it? Well, as I talked about before, it's really an anti-poverty measure. But also, if the system were dismantled, taxpayers would end up supporting children, which doesn't seem fair. So many people hate the system, but most people agree that children need to be supported. They need to have their basic needs met. But not everyone agrees that the current system is really the best way to accomplish that. So what are some of the challenges with the current system? Well, the system seems to work against its own goals much of the time. For instance, it's fixated on financial compensation, right? It's really kind of very focused on that without considering a lot of other factors. We know that frequent visits by non-custodial fathers reduce the likelihood that the custodial mother's household will experience what's referred to as food insecurity, so the mother and the children not having enough food. Yet the system is numbers driven, with many fathers reporting they need to be working instead of visiting their children so they can keep up with the support. This financially based system doesn't encourage shared parenting, but shared parenting is remarkably successful, and the research literature is really clear on this. Both the father and the mother being active in a child's life predicts success across many dimensions, including school, staying out of trouble with law enforcement, mental health, and physical health. However, the system doesn't account well for time invested by the father, even when it constitutes childcare, like when the father watches the child so that the mother can go to work. One instance that stands out for me on this topic is this father who cared for his child about 180 days out of the year, so about half the year, but still had to pay over $1,000 a month in child support. If he didn't keep the child at all, the payment would have been $1,050, a $50 difference. So not much of an incentive for that father to get involved with shared parenting. Now, as it turns out, in the situation I'm talking about, he did that anyway. He did watch the child for about half the year. But again, there wasn't much of an incentive. It's not a good system. It's not rewarding the behavior that would help the child. His time, the use of his home, and other expenses that would be incurred by this arrangement, like transportation, are essentially discarded by the system. They don't seem to factor into the equation. Now, speaking of equations, we also see a lot of bad math on the part of the courts, but also some of the scientific literature. This problem is called innumeracy. It's really the mathematical version of literacy, and it's an epidemic. I've seen several examples of this. We see in the scientific literature that some research has overestimated the ability of non-custodial fathers, sometimes called non-resident fathers, to pay child support, essentially indicating that a large proportion of these fathers could pay when they actually couldn't pay. And this research was later used to make important policy decisions. Then we see all these formulas that are used in various jurisdictions to determine the amount of child support due. They're based on the income of both parents and not on the actual needs of the child. Lawmakers, court employees, even judges are bad at math, and the formulas make little sense. There's no logical reason behind the dynamics of how they function. I've regularly seen situations where the fathers were paying 50, 60, or 70% of their income in child support. I've seen a few situations where fathers were literally homeless because the payments were too high and they either had to pay the support or rent an apartment, but they couldn't do both. I've seen people who are over $100,000 in arrears with functionally no chance of ever catching up with their support obligation. Now, what exacerbates this problem is the fact that there's typically no accountability for the money. It's often used to support the children, but there are some custodial mothers who use the funds for other purposes and never have to answer to the law. In most jurisdictions, there's absolutely no obligation to track the expenses, zero accountability. So the government is compelling one person to pay another for a specific purpose, helping a child, and then not tracking where that money goes. So what about the mental health aspects? Where does the system fall short in terms of considering mental health concerns? Well, we see that recently divorced fathers with joint physical custody have a higher level of emotional well-being than divorced fathers with non-custodial status. And again, the evidence here is remarkably clear. But immediately after a divorce, the court often grants temporary custody to the mother, and this sets the tone for later proceedings, discouraging fathers from pursuing custody. So they feel like they've lost the battle before the battle has even started. The court bases these decisions on the idea that the mother is automatically going to be a better parent, that the mother should be custodial, when there's actually little evidence to support this. Our best evidence indicates that mothers and fathers form similarly strong bonds with children and are equally effective caregivers. The mental health aspects of divorce and loss are not taken into account when it comes to fathers, with the default arrangement again being the mothers keep the children. Fathers feel a tremendous sense of loss, which is exacerbated by only seeing the children occasionally through the archaic visitation guidelines. A common visitation schedule, is 1 weekend and 1 weeknight every 2 weeks. So during a divorce, the father is separated from the mother, which most of the time would be somewhat painful, and then loses contact with the children at the same time. The contact he does have is tense and highly scrutinized. The system is not designed to provide mental health counseling or other support to non-custodial fathers. The courts don't seem to understand mental health or personality characteristics and how they factor into behavior during divorces. They may use a mental health diagnosis against a parent, but they fail to appreciate how personality characteristics can be detrimental to the welfare of children. For example, they rarely factor in the destructive effects of narcissism, whether it's narcissism on the part of the father or the mother. For example, one of the characteristics of narcissism we see is manipulation. 20% of custodial mothers who do not receive child support don't receive it because they didn't file for support specifically, because they didn't want the child to have contact with the father. So in these instances, the mothers are turning down money that would be helpful to the children in order to be manipulative. Now, there could be other reasons. They could be scared of the father, and there's other factors. But still, in the instances where it is manipulation, judges aren't catching this. They're not really exploring this angle. They're not ordering evaluations to find this out. Now, an important note when I'm talking about custody, men are less likely to seek custody, so the gender difference here in custody isn't always about an unfair system, right? So that's important to keep in mind. So moving on with the shortcomings of the system, we come to the idea of the deadbeat dad, right? We hear this all the time. This phrase has been with us for many years. It's a situation where non-custodial fathers who get behind on child support are stigmatized. A deadbeat dad is a father who is behind on child support or who never paid it and who has the resources to pay it. So if a father cannot pay it, they're not a deadbeat dad. Now, of course, there's always going to be certain individuals who don't pay their child support when they are capable of doing so. And this includes fathers and mothers. But is this phenomenon of the deadbeat dad really common enough to live up to the construct the way we see it presented in the media, for example? Well, we see that 66% of fathers who don't pay child support can't pay it. So 2/3 would not qualify under the definition of a deadbeat dad. I believe the stigma of the deadbeat dad really does have a tremendous effect. We see that courts are not responsive enough in hearing modification requests. They're overly punitive when fathers get behind, assuming that they have the resources to pay, but they simply don't want to pay. Not assuming that they may not understand the system, the fathers may not be able to afford an attorney, or they've had other problems that explain why they didn't pay, like mental health concerns or physical health concerns. The courts tend to jump directly to this idea that the father must be a deadbeat dad, when it's not likely to be the correct explanation. One of the most punitive methods of forcing payment, of course, is incarceration, which should only be used in situations where the fathers demonstrate that they have the means to pay, but are simply unwilling to do so. Interestingly, though, research shows that this strategy of incarceration does not increase the total amount of support money collected. It's not actually an effective means of motivation. The threat of incarceration actually increases feelings of anxiety and depression, which can prevent a father from working. Therefore, they're not earning money. Therefore, they're not paying the child support. Incarceration actually causes a cycle that's bad for children. We see this father who is behind on support, who goes to prison. When they're there, they can't pay the support. Interest accumulates and the payments accumulate. They get more behind. When they're released, they're more likely to be arrested again for the same thing. They're sentenced to more time. They have a criminal record, so getting a job is difficult when they are released. It's just a vicious cycle that has many different components to it. During any given day in the United States, an estimated 50,000 parents are in prison or jail for child support non-payment. The vast majority, of course, are fathers. Now, an interesting note here when talking about the term deadbeat dad, there are more fathers paying child support than mothers, but a greater proportion of non-custodial mothers fail to pay child support. So there's actually a higher proportion of deadbeat moms. There are more deadbeat dads, literally, right, in total numbers, but a higher proportion of deadbeat moms, but we rarely hear this term being used. Another reason that fathers get behind on child support is because of the idea of back child support. This is what happens when a father doesn't know that he had a child. So he didn't save money. He didn't set money aside for a child because he didn't know that he had one. So he starts off in arrears. So when that first order is handed down, there's already a liability. I've seen orders of support come through where the father was $10,000 in arrears before he had a chance to make one payment. Then we see this idea of the equitable father, right? This is a controversial issue, and this is where a lot of people are really upset. Even if they agree with some of the other components of the child support system, this part really attracts a lot of attention. And this really has to do with biological fathers versus legal fathers, right? So fathers pay child support for children who aren't theirs. This happens every day. A lot of people believe that if a man can prove that he's not the father of a child, that he'll go into the court and the judge will say, oh, we're really terribly sorry about that. We're going to start collecting this money for you and get that money back to you. We're going to pay it back to you with interest and issue an apology. And the mother, who may have fraudulently led the man to believe he was the father, she'll be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, right? This is not what happens at all, right? What happens in real life is the judge says, you just continue to pay the support. It doesn't matter that you're not the biological father, you're now deemed to be the legal father. In a marriage, the husband is presumed to be the father of a child after his marriage to the mother. In some states, there is an irrefutable presumption of paternity, which means that if a child is born during the marriage, the man will be deemed the father, even if a DNA test says otherwise. Now, I understand that there are a variety of reasons for this policy. It's not simply to be unfair to fathers. It's thought of as more stabilizing for the children. But if a man is not the father of a child, making him legally obligated to support that child based on a behavior in which he did not engage is not reasonable. Not only have I seen this many times in my clinical experience, a man paying child support for a child that wasn't his, I've also seen men go to prison for failing to pay child support for children that weren't theirs. It's not clear what good this accomplishes. So with all this evidence in mind about the child support system, what are my thoughts on mandatory child support based on income? So these are just my opinions based on the literature I've read and again, my clinical experience. Well, it's clear that some sort of system that involves money changing hands in the situation of the separation of parents is necessary. But I think there are many ways that the current system can be improved. From the very beginning, paternity should be established using scientific methods. DNA testing has been available for some time. Either a man is the father of a child or he's not. If he's not, he shouldn't have to pay child support. I don't really think the arguments about the family stability can outweigh this kind of fundamental right. The presumed custody arrangement when people are divorced should be joint physical custody, and I know that's already the case in some places. One party shouldn't have an advantage going into the custody dispute over another. The courts should strongly encourage and offer resources to facilitate parents working out informal support methods, including what is referred to as in-kind support, like providing childcare, as opposed to structured support payments. The government getting involved in forcing people to pay each other money really should be a last resort. All money paid in accordance with the support order should be accounted for, including money that's paid but goes to the government and never makes it to the custodial mother. So really, accountability helps the mother, the father, and the children. Formulas should be developed for deciding how much support is due based on the actual cost of supporting the child, not necessarily the income of the parents. Non-custodial parents are penalized for earning more, and therefore, they may not seek out better income opportunities. Now, this is going to take some math skills. It's difficult to work out the exact cost of raising a child and how much should be credited for being the custodial parent and other factors. But just dodging the issue with lazy formulas is not the answer. Now, in terms of modifications of support orders, this process needs to be faster. If a father loses his job or something else changes, you can't have these payments just accruing and going into the arrears. If he lost his job, he lost his job. It's really just common sense. Additionally, other considerations like the father's mental health and any changes in that mental health status should be weighed. And my last thought in terms of how the child support system maybe should be changed, instead of jumping right to incarceration, how about other programs where individuals work off the debt? We see this with other types of fees, like the fees generated from traffic violations. So it makes sense that it could be applied to child support. And I know in some areas, of course, it is, but I think this is a program that could be expanded. Sending a father to prison for not paying child support, again, is not actually helping the child. So I know whenever I talk about issues like mental health and child support, there are going to be a variety of opinions. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They're sure to generate really interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found this description of the shortcomings of the child support system to be interesting. Thanks for watching.
Dr. Grande.
He kind of disappointed me at the end
Okay, which part?
when he said the parent could still work off the debt in some other way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean he's unrealistic at that part because he just doesn't understand the dynamics of a person that's in that situation. That's why I wanted to make sure that you understand that I know you and I are pretty much in the same situation. They did you exactly like they normally do the man. Okay?
Mhm.
They did you. You're a woman, but they did you like they do the man. And it doesn't make it right. Like I said, there are guys out there that would love to see you suffer like men have, like most of the men are suffering. But that don't make it right, you know. So, like I was telling you, I understand this whole deadbeat dad thing. When I first heard about it, I was just like, wow. And I volunteered for child support. Okay.
Right.
Something you volunteer for can be turned all the way around, and then you can be called a deadbeat dad. You're going through life. Life is losing a job that you didn't want to lose because you couldn't help it. Life is a health situation coming about that you couldn't help because it just came about. This is life, but these are things that the court system, the family court system, and child support don't take into consideration. And like he was saying, they should never get involved with the money aspect of it.
Horribly mismanaged, and it should be abolished.
Absolutely.
And right, and going back to the Sweden model, like I know I mentioned before, when you get divorced, the two of you should just sit down and just divvy up.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
right, and
Let me
just
look
go
up
on
that
with life.
model. I'm going to look up that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was in the film Erasing Family. Everyone should see Erasing Family because it talks about parental alienation. But they bring up the Sweden model towards the end of the film. And they said that when there's a divorce, two people, they just sit down and say, well, I'll pay for this, you pay for that. He or she wants to see you on these dates, and that's fine with me. We can split Christmases, and the kids are fine with it because they're happy because they get to see both parents. And Sweden is saying that, well, there still is litigation and there can still be high conflict litigation, but it's not as bad in so many cases as it is over here, where there's greed. And I'm going to also add that this would work out great, and it was working for me in my case for a while, that you can co-parent decently as long as you don't let third-party interference totally torpedo the relationship you have with your co-parent
Right.
and your kids.
Yeah, I mean, they know that if they get the system on their side, they can destroy you. They can dominate you. And these are evil people that do this. My ex included. I mean, I'm just going to say she's an evil person. To
Mm-hmm.
do that to our children and to make them think whatever she made them think about me, it's just the wrong thing to do, man. She's going to take that to her grave, and he's going to
Right.
take that to his grave, what he did to you. And it's just, it never makes it right. And even if she came back and apologized, that wouldn't even make it right.
No,
you know
no.
I would accept it, but it's on so many levels of just the person from within. If you're that type of person from within, and that's deep down, you're just that type of person. And making an apology to someone is not going to change anything because you're still that type of person.
Right. And there's no way you can backtrack. You can't change what you did to that person. By saying to a child, if you don't come home tonight, I'm going to put your mother in jail and you will never see her again.
Oh, that's just low down. Evil.
Right. It totally. And because they were counting nights. You count nights, as many nights as you have, so to make sure you get that child support money.
Right.
The greed. So let's get rid of the greed. Let's just get rid of it.
So let me ask you this now: have your kids responded back to you about your book at all?
My son, who is not speaking to me right now, the last time, one of the last times I spoke to him, he did say he read it and he was remembering things. And I hope he goes back and reads it again because it shows how hard I fought for what they wanted. Those kids wanted 50-50, back and forth between the houses like the Sweden model. That's what they were happy with. I went before the Superior Court judge and explained that's what they wanted, and I still lost the case because they were connected with the lower courts, and they knew I was a non-custodial parent, and that was the end of that story. But I fought for what they wanted, and I hope someday they realize how hard I fought. I've got the paperwork sitting right behind me of how hard I fought for them and what they wanted. And if a judge says no, the judge says no. There's nothing I can do about it. And then they aged out. They turned 18 and off they went. But now they have been brainwashed to the point that they hate me. And I, don't know what to.
It's just a sad situation.
Yeah.
You're a good person too. It's amazing. It happens to the best of us. It happens to the good people. The people that are already bad, they're on the good side of the law. Because just like we talk, birds of a feather flock together. They're over there with
Right.
the people. Those are the evil ones, and they're all in it together.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how that works. But the good people that are trying to do the right thing, are the ones that get the brunt of the bad side of this. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it takes
think
major to turn this around. And like I said, I'm going to keep doing this until I can reach as many people as I possibly can while I'm on this earth, just to inform people. Don't get involved in this.
right. Don't get involved, and you can forgive, but
Just remember your kids and just try to take care of them before you go trying to put the court into your business, because they're not going to care about any of you. They don't care
right,
about your kids. They just care about the money. You have to
right.
understand that part of it. You
And I
think
think what,
they're gonna, we're gonna make him pay or make her pay, and that's
mhm,
gonna be justice. That's not justice. Somebody forcing
right,
somebody to pay money they don't have. That's not justice.
In fact, I was sitting in domestic relations and I was just sitting there waiting for whatever I was waiting for. But some guy came in and he was poorly dressed. And he walked up to the desk. He says, "I want to file child support on my ex-wife." And I'm here thinking to myself, if you're dressed like that, how is she dressed? Um, you know, how much money are you going to get out of her?
But if he got the right lawyer, the right judge, or the right people, the right evil people behind him, he can make her life miserable if they
Oh,
decide
yes.
to do
Oh,
it.
yes.
And that's the worst part about this system is that they take scenarios like that, manipulate and exploit them to their benefit, which is in the end a big windfall. Hundreds of
Hmm.
thousands, even millions of dollars, even billions from the state aspect and the federal aspect as to how much money they're going to make off of, virtually destroying people and
Right.
their kids.
Oh, exactly. I think karma comes in different ways. And I think what they learned from my case was, oops, we made a mistake by filing a secondary false accusation on her, which caused her to lose her job involuntarily. Oops, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Now we're not getting any money. And then when I was representing myself, for sure, they were not, they never got anything they thought they were going to ever get out of me, which was the karma of it all.
Yeah, it is just, man, I'm a stronger person having gone through this, and
Yes, definitely.
this is my calling. I'm gonna keep fighting. I'm gonna keep working with people like yourself and spreading the word, doing these podcasts, writing books, passing out cards to everybody I know, explaining the situation to them, trying to help them not have to get into this. And that's going to be my inspiration. That's going to stay my inspiration.
That's what we have to do, is we have to keep educating the younger generation.
Absolutely. So, but yeah, but I think with that, we're going to bring this podcast to a close. It's the Relevance Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Aikins. We've had another very interesting podcast with Miss Maryann Petri. And I just want to say thanks, Maryann, for doing another segment with me. And I look forward to doing more of these and spreading the word.
Thank you so much, Mike, for being on Slam the Gavel, which is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in the family courtrooms that perpetuate parental alienation. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption. Please join us again in the future for another exciting podcast. We are available on iHeartRadio, Apple, other platforms such as, I'm screwing up right now. I'm tired. But we're out there on Spotify as well.
All right, Maryann. Well, thanks a lot. Have a great evening.
Okay, don't hang up though, okay?